Something is happening in Cleveland, and I'm not going to pretend I saw it coming at this speed or with this kind of clarity. I've been watching quarterback situations for a long time. The drama, the politics, the carefully managed competitions where everyone says the right things publicly and does completely different things behind closed doors. I know how those games get played, but what's unfolding right now at the Browns facility doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel managed or orchestrated for optics. It feels like a young quarterback walking into a professional environment for the first time and making everyone around him quietly reconsider what they thought they knew. And that's a very specific kind of energy that deserves more than a highlight reel reaction. Day 3 of rookie minicamp. Shedeur Sanders, 80% completions in 11-on-11 work. I want you to sit with that number for a moment before we move on, because it's easy to hear a statistic and let it pass through you without registering what it actually means in context. 11-on-11 work isn't individual drills against air. It isn't a controlled skeleton rep where a quarterback throws routes with no defensive pressure. 11-on-11 is the closest thing to a real football game that a practice field can produce. There are defensive backs reading routes. There are linebackers disguising coverage. There are guys being paid to make a quarterback look bad. And they are trying. And in that environment, on his third day as a professional football player, Shedeur Sanders was completing 8 out of 10 passes. Let me tell you what most rookie quarterbacks look like in that same setting, because the contrast is where the story lives. Most first-year players arrive at minicamp in a state of barely controlled overwhelm. They've prepared, they've studied film, they've worked with private coaches and run hundreds of reps in training, and they still get to that field and feel the speed of everything at the NFL level. The defensive complexity, the timing windows that are a half-second tighter than anything they experienced in college, the mental load of processing a defense while executing a protection call and delivering an accurate ball all in the span of a breath. And it gets to them. That's normal. That's expected. The whole point of early evaluation periods is partly to watch how young players survive being overwhelmed and find their footing on the other side. A coaching staff goes in braced for that adjustment curve. They build it into their planning. Shedeur Sanders didn't give them anything to brace for. He showed up on day 1 and performed like a man who had been rehearsing for this specific test for months. No visible scramble, no adjustment lag. Todd Monken put him into 11-on-11 reps immediately, and I want to be clear about what that decision tells you. You don't make that call because you're being generous with your evaluation process. You make it because you have a hypothesis about a player's readiness, and you want to stress test it against real resistance before spending more time on controlled environments that don't tell you what you need to know. Monken wanted to watch Shedeur Sanders compete. Not showcase, compete. And what he watched was a completion percentage that most 10-year veterans would accept on a structured practice day without complaint. But the percentage isn't the full picture. What those completions actually looked like underneath the number is where the real conversation is. There was one specific rep that I keep returning to. Shedeur tilts right before the snap. His eyes already scanning the defensive alignment before the ball even gets to his hands. He's reading coverage pre-snap, building his mental picture of where the vulnerabilities will open before the play technically starts. Then the snap happens. He processes left and the ball comes out immediately. No hesitation, no second look, no microscopic pause that you see in a quarterback who has completed the read intellectually but hasn't fully committed to it emotionally. The ball was already gone, placed into a window that existed for less than a second, and the receiver caught it in full stride without breaking step. That detail matters more than people realize. When a ball arrives in stride with that kind of precision, the receiver isn't just catching a pass, he's immediately a threat after the catch. The quarterback did all the hard work up front. That's not a rep. That's a concept being executed at the speed of instinct, and that speed only comes from preparation so deep it stops feeling like preparation and starts feeling like natural movement. Then there's the deep ball, and I have to address this directly because there has been a real, ongoing conversation about Shedeur Sanders and arm strength. People I respect have questioned whether he has the physical tools to threaten NFL defenses vertically, whether he can generate the velocity to make a corner genuinely respect the go route. I understand that conversation. Arm strength is a real evaluation category, and the NFL is full of quarterbacks who were efficient in college and ran into physical limitations the moment the field got longer. But what Shedeur showed in that deep ball drill was not a quarterback managing a limitation. He threw a genuine full extension deep ball, mechanics right, launch angle right, velocity right, and the ball dropped into a receiver's hands in a spot a trailing cornerback cannot reach without a spectacular play. Touch, trajectory, timing, all three present on one downfield throw. When you see those three things together, you're watching a quarterback who can actually weaponize the vertical game, who can force a safety to cheat deep and leave the intermediate routes exposed. That's not just completing a deep ball in practice, that's unlocking a dimension of an offense. And Cleveland has been waiting a very long time for a quarterback who can do that. The touchdown on the left side is the play I keep coming back to when I'm looking for the word that best describes Shedeur Sanders right now. He leans into the pocket, weight forward, body committed to the throw rather than retreating from pressure, and surveys the entire left side with genuine patience. Not the frantic scan of a young player processing too much at once. A controlled, deliberate read. He identifies the route coming open, trusts what he sees completely, and delivers the ball in stride with placement that makes the catch look effortless when it absolutely was not. The word I keep landing on is conviction. Not the performed kind, not the bravado some young players put on because they've been coached that confidence is something you fake until it becomes real. The authentic kind. The kind that only comes from preparation so thorough that trusting yourself in the moment isn't a conscious decision. It just happens. You watch that play, and you understand that Shedeur Sanders has internalized this offense well beyond memorizing playbook concepts. He has made it his. I want to spend a moment on Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston, because the chemistry dimension of this minicamp is being significantly undervalued. The football media tends to treat quarterback-receiver chemistry as something soft and narrative-driven rather than a concrete operational reality. But chemistry between a quarterback and his pass catchers is one of the most practically critical elements of offensive construction, and it takes real time and repetitions to build. What people were watching on that field was Shedeur reading Concepcion's releases in real time, anticipating Boston's route adjustments before they happened, throwing to locations rather than bodies, delivering the ball to a spot based on where he trusted his receiver would be, not waiting for separation before committing. That level of anticipatory throwing only develops when a quarterback has internalized route concepts deeply enough to project receiver positioning rather than simply react to it. You cannot fake that in competitive reps. The ball placement tells you immediately, and every report from that field says it was real. Concepcion's quickness and technical precision as a route runner is a specific match for what Shedeur does best. Boston adds the size and physicality to win contested situations in the red zone. That combination gives a quarterback like Shedeur the infrastructure to express his full range. Monken did not assemble that group casually. He built it around a specific offensive vision, and Shedeur Sanders is the quarterback that vision was designed for. Which leads me to Monken himself. And this is the part of the story I think is getting the least attention relative to how important it actually is. The coaching change in Cleveland isn't just backdrop to the Shedeur Sanders story, it is the mechanism that makes everything else possible. Monken walked into that building without carrying any organizational debt to decisions made before he arrived. He doesn't owe the Deshaun Watson contract a starting job. He doesn't owe previous evaluations any continuation or deference. His entire professional obligation is singular. Find the best available quarterback through honest evaluation and build the most competitive offense around that player. That's the whole assignment. And the way he has approached it tells you something specific about how he sees this situation playing out. The helmet cameras are the detail I cannot stop thinking about. Monken installed cameras on his quarterback specifically to study their visual processing. The eye movement, the coverage reads, the decision sequence that happens in the fraction of a second between reading a defense and pulling the trigger. That is not a casual coaching tool. That is the kind of investment a coach makes in a player he has decided to genuinely develop. You don't build custom analytical infrastructure around a quarterback you're managing through an open competition. You build it around the player whose development you have taken personal professional ownership of. When I hear that Monken is studying Shedeur's eye movement on film after practice, I don't see a coach managing uncertainty. I see a coach optimizing a quarterback he is already committed to, learning everything he can about how that player processes so he can help him get faster, cleaner, and more reliable under pressure. That's not competition management. That's investment. Now I have to talk about Deshaun Watson directly. Watson is not at that facility. He is not on the practice field. He is not building timing with Concepcion and Boston. He is not accumulating any of the developmental currency that actually matters inside a new offensive system. The repetitions, the daily relationship building, the conceptual synchronization that only happens through sustained work. Every rep Shedeur takes in this offense is a rep Watson is not taking. Every timing sequence refined, every connection deepened between this quarterback and these receivers. All of it is building on one side of a ledger, and nothing is building on the other. Watson has a contract and a history, but contracts don't build route timing, and history doesn't earn starting jobs inside new offensive systems. Presence does, daily work does, and right now only one of these two quarterbacks is present and doing the work. The gap between them isn't theoretical. It's being established through real football repetitions in real time, and it is widening every single day. After practice, Shedeur stood in front of the media and said things I think are being underread. The way he talked about Monken, the genuine enthusiasm in how he described the coaching staff's detail, their individual investment, the intensity of the daily environment, that wasn't a press conference answer. That was a player describing an environment that is genuinely giving him what he needs to grow. Young quarterbacks in high-visibility situations either perform confidence or perform indifference. Shedeur did neither. He spoke with grounded clarity, direct, unguarded, specific. When a player talks about his coaching staff with that quality of authentic excitement on day 3 of his professional career, you're not hearing media strategy. You're hearing him tell you what it actually feels like to be in that building every day. And then he addressed his critics directly, without anger and without performing detachment. He said plainly that if you genuinely want the Cleveland Browns to win, you get behind your players and push in the same direction. Most young players in his position either get visibly frustrated, understandable but a signal the noise is getting through, or they perform indifference when everyone paying attention can see it isn't real. Shedeur acknowledged the conversation, made his point with precision, and immediately returned to football. That tells you something specific about how he's built. He doesn't need the noise to stop in order to operate. He can hold the external pressure and the internal competitive focus at the same time, and know clearly which one determines what happens next on the field. That is not something you develop in a workshop. That is the architecture of a person who has genuinely processed his environment without being controlled by it. Step back and look at all of this together, and the picture becomes very specific. An 80% completion rate in competitive group work on day 3 of a rookie minicamp. A deep ball that ended a real conversation about arm limitations with a single throw. Chemistry with 2 new receivers that looked immediate and technically grounded rather than just aesthetically promising. A head coach investing granular analytical infrastructure into his development, the kind that signals organizational commitment, not competition management. A media performance that demonstrated emotional intelligence and leadership clarity at a moment when most players his age would have deflected. And a counterpart who is absent, unaccumulating, not building anything inside this system right now. Put all of that together, and the picture it draws is not ambiguous. It's not a quarterback surviving a competition and hoping for the best. It's a quarterback constructing an offense around himself, rep by rep, with the full investment of a staff that has already decided which direction this is heading. Cleveland may not have made any official announcements, but what's happening on that practice field every day is its own announcement. Quieter than a press conference, more durable than a headline, and more convincing than anything a public relations strategy could manufacture. The work is the statement. And right now, that statement belongs entirely to Shedeur Sanders.